Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. As members, I will call your names. Please respond in the affirmative. Andy Fisk,
Here.
Alan Greenberg, which I believe Alan is going to be late, and Tom Fickner.
Here.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, or those we are participating in the agenda tonight, Tom Ryder, BOH engineer. In all fairness, I did tell Tom to that portion started at 7:30, so some of these people might only be coming in for 7:30. The VNA Executive Director, Michelle McGovern.
Yes.
And then, thank you. And the VNA Public Health Nurse, Ann Labont, she said she might be chiming in tonight as well.
She may be popping in a bit later. She's not feeling all that great. So
yeah, she had called me about, and she was telling me about her allergies and everything. So it's been a crazy time.
Yeah, she's had a rough couple of days.
Yeah. Select board members, Lonnie Tinio, Mark Reel, and Mike Maroli. Town Administrator, Kimberly Newman. Building Inspector, John Erickson. And Administrative Assistant to the Building Inspector, Gail Wellman. Principal Assessor, Jean Berthold. Finance Director, Treasurer Collector, Jody Kersey. Dan is already here, and I believe Town Council will be on at some point in time, but she's probably still with the Selectmen probably. So, good evening. This is open meeting of the Mendon Board of Health is being conducted remotely consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of March 1st, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the COVID-19 virus outbreak. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public body are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order in which you will find posted with the agenda is for meetings allowing public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Board of Health is convening via teleconference and video conference via Microsoft Teams, as posted on town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded so that some attendees are participating by video conference. Also, please be aware that all folks may be able to see you, and that take care not to share your screen on your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along the agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, or the chair, will introduce speakers on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait for the chair to yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. And with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Missy. It's been a while since we've heard all that, but that's good. Thank you. Starting with the first item on the agenda, we have the VNA. Michelle, this is for you. Our requests to you quite a few times to have you join a meeting. I know you're very busy, and we were looking to hopefully get some description on your bill instead of just a one-liner saying COVID costs. Could you help us with that, please?
Yep, actually, I talked to Ann Labonte today. I have all of the months from September 2020 until April 2021 with all of your confirmed and probable numbers. So I can send those along to the town. I can send out itemized invoices for each and every month with all of the numbers to support the invoices if you would like.
That would be nice if we could get some, we just
Yeah.
want to, we have no issue with paying something that we've had service for. We would like some definition as to what we are getting, and it just seemed very vague on the bills. And also, the amount of money on the increase was astronomical. We would like to have an explanation for that, please.
Right. I told Missy I typed in the wrong number. I didn't catch it. She was queuing me and I missed it. And then when I spoke to my Board of Health nurse tonight, she said, well, Missy told me you quoted 17.5. I said, oh my gosh, that's got to be a typo or I made a mistake. So I went back and looked, and sure enough, it's a typo. So it's 7,500, not 17,500. So that is the cost for 2022. I think you'll find that much more agreeable.
And that is the current cost that we've been paying?
It's a little bumped up because we're anticipating we're going to have to do some more COVID clinics annually. So that would be an additional clinic for the town along with the flu. And if that's not the case, if that doesn't happen, then we will adjust it off in the following year and go back to the baseline price. But I'm guessing that the Commonwealth is going to want some annual clinics.
That could very well be, and more than likely will be. My question to you is, why do we not have a baseline price? And if they do happen, then we pay the extra. That seems kind of backwards to me, to pay in advance and expect that what if we don't pay them, then we're going to get money back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That's not a problem. I can keep it at the same price as long as the board agrees that it would be an incurred cost to add that clinic. And then we can talk about it and add it to addendum. That's fine by me.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
Our other board member that's with us currently, Tom Fickner, could you please give us some insight on this, please?
Well, I think Michelle addressed the issues that we had. Thanks, Michelle, for joining the call tonight.
Sure.
I have to tell you that personally, I've been kind of very disappointed with this whole process the last few months, trying to get some details and information from you. I'm hoping that maybe it was just a snafu in communications and that things will smooth out a bit. I will say that the services in general from the VNA have been fantastic. And speaking for Ann Labonte, she's been great. And the people she's been bringing to the table as far as taking care of certain things like the flu clinic and things to the pandemic have been very much appreciated. But I will say the administrative aspect seems to have been very lacking. So I'm glad to hear that there was just simply a typo in that number. That is a tremendous difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad to hear that you're willing to work with us and kind of present the contract as Andy has outlined, to the point where I would be in agreement as well that if it were to happen with an additional clinic that's pandemic or COVID related, most assuredly, I do not, and I don't think any board member wants to see the VNA incur any extra services or expect services for free. So you should certainly be entitled to be compensated for the expenditures that you put out, or for that matter, any increases that you're experiencing. I know the operational costs do go up, and so I'm understanding of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of covers it from my standpoint, and look forward to taking a look at the actual contract itself that come before us for the next fiscal year. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Michelle, we would like to take you up on those receipts and descriptions that you could, if you could get those to us, please. We would appreciate that.
I can get those to Missy by the end of the week this week, if that's agreeable to everybody.
It is to me. Is that for you, Tom?
It is, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Missy, do you have any questions or comments?
No, not really. I'm relieved that that the contract was a typo because I couldn't figure out why it was such a large increase. I will have to say that working with Anne has been a pleasure. I've been seeing her at the Uxbridge Clinic, and she's always very chipper, and she's very fun to work with. And I appreciate everything that she has done and her team has done throughout the COVID pandemic and previous to that. Anne has always been a pleasure to work with, and that's all I would have to say. Thanks.
And I'd like to reiterate that yes, Anne is a ray of sunshine. She's very professional and she's always smiling. She does her job very professional.
She's
Very
smiling
to
right
work
now.
Thank you. I hope I can give you all a good laugh just for this because I've never used Microsoft Teams. So if you saw I had to log on, log back in, then my camera wasn't working, but at least I'm not upside down.
with.
Because usually my camera shows me upside down and I can't fix that. So I had to put it on mute because I was giggling, going, I was not made for this technology stuff. But I just want to let you know, I will also be sending an end of report so you can see for monthly, month to month, what your COVID numbers were. And the reason why you don't get those monthly is I'm going to be honest with you, they're awful to run in Maven. One report can take up to 2 hours to just run. Maven is not sometimes user-friendly in running the reports. I honestly think it's because the number of users in the pandemic that are on. So if I run a report from Mendon, let's say I just wanted to know what September was, my computer can be spinning for 2 to 3 hours just for that.
Okay, we have an IT professional here on our board. Tom, do you have any suggestions to an alternative to Maven?
No, this is just for COVID numbers, Andy. This is,
Yeah.
I have the reports, I've done them. It's just to do an end of the year report, just have to compile them, but we can send you over what the numbers are month to month.
Yeah, that would be easier. I mean, you don't have to go through that, put your computer through.
Oh, you
That's
have to,
fine.
because you have to run it through Maven for all the COVID numbers, so you can see what your case numbers are. There's no other way to run it.
I'm not
And-
the IT guy. I hate computers, so it's above my pay grade. Go ahead, Missy.
No, it's Michelle, and I told the board that I would send them all of the numbers individually for each month because you had gone through and pulled them for me. So I will be sending it to them by the
Okay.
end of the week. And they were all happy and agreeable with that.
I was on that, you just couldn't see me. I could hear you all.
Good. So we're good there.
Okay.
Perfect.
And did you by any chance happen to hear what Michelle said about the discrepancy in the bill, what the reason was for that?
I did. I was
Okay.
on, you couldn't see me.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. Well, I believe I'm satisfied with everything we just spoke of, and I wish it had happened months ago. Thank you very much for joining us both, ladies. Tom, do you have anything else?
I do not. I think we covered it. Thank you very much, Shan, and thank you very much, Michelle.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
Missy?
Thank you.
I don't have anything else except Anne. I will see you Thursday morning in Uxbridge.
You will see me at the clinic.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was good stuff. Thank you.
So Andy, the next thing on your agenda is discussing the routing slip process with other departments. Right now for that, I see Town Council Cindy Mara's on. I see Gail from the Building Department has joined us. Jean Berthold, the Principal Assessor, has joined us. And Dan from the Parks Department has joined us. I believe Dan has a question for you, Andy.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. I was just going to give you a heads up. It would appear that the select board meeting may still be ongoing. I don't know, maybe Cindy knows if she came from there, but just so you know.
Well,
Go ahead,
the meeting for the routing slip was scheduled to start at 7:30. So if they make it in 15 minutes, that would be good. I don't know if we should start without them. But, Missy, what do you think?
Oh, actually, Cindy has her hand up. Go ahead, Cindy.
I'm sorry.
I don't have the agenda in front of me because I also am technologically challenged, and to get here, I have to send the agenda to my other device. The select board meeting has ended. If the notice of the public meeting says 7:30, you probably should not start it until 7:30, even though it's not a hearing, it's just a public meeting.
Right.
That's just my view of the world. If it was a hearing, I'd give you a hard and fast, no, do not start. But
Thank you.
it's the meeting, it's up to you, but if you did actually notice it for 7:30, that would be the right thing to do. But
Missy, it's my understanding that you posted it for 7:30, is that correct?
I did, and I know Tom Ryder is coming for 7:30.
Yeah.
So I would say
Okay.
yes. I mean, there's two other topics we can briefly discuss if you want before people
Sure.
come in for that particular item. And that is to discuss the shared services grant and any updates on the COVID-19 or COVID-19 clinics. If you'd like, I'll just jump on the COVID-19 clinics real quick.
Yes, please.
Starting this week, we are going to Thursdays and Thursdays only. I believe next Thursday, June 3rd, is the last first dose clinics. After that, they will only be around for second doses. And then it looks like we will be shutting down the clinics unless something changes. They get a lot more participation, whatnot. It looks like the last clinics will be Thursday, June 24th. So from here on out, I will be in the morning at the clinic and at night the clinic. So that will be my schedule. Do you guys have any questions or anything about that?
I got a question, Missy. Have you by any chance heard, and I should have posed this question while the ladies from the VMA were on, there's been speculation, I haven't seen anything on the news or anywhere in the media. The shots for the virus, is it going to be a yearly thing? Have you heard any rumblings of that?
I've heard rumblings it could possibly, there'd be a booster, or this could be possibly, you know, when you go get your flu shot, you'll get another COVID shot. But I think everything's still kind of up in the air. I don't know, Tom, have you heard anything?
I'm sorry, I just joined, so I didn't quite hear what was said.
I'm sorry, I meant Tom Bickner.
Oh, so bear with me for a second. This is Tom Ryder. I have to step out. I just wanted to let you know that I'm in, but I got to step out for a moment.
Oh, come on, make up your mind, Tom. Are you in or you out?
My daughter leaving back to Baltimore for graduation, so I got to make sure she heads out right
That's
now.
okay.
So
I'm funning you.
Yep.
Yeah, Missy, I've only heard similar to what you've heard, just the generalities. A lot of things are up in the air, a lot of balls in the air, nothing concrete. It's still a moving, fluid situation with regard to vaccinations and what people have to look forward to in the next few months with regard to potential boosters and things like that. So I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what we get some concrete from the state level and the federal level. Back to you.
Thank you. So that's, go ahead, finish about the COVID, please.
So that's pretty much what I have for COVID. You know, things are starting to wind down, thank goodness. As everybody knows, the mask mandate for fully vaccinated people goes into effect on Saturday. The state of emergency will be lifted on June 15th. But I did hear, or I actually saw on Channel 5, I haven't really been in the office to look at email, so I don't know if anything's come through the state, but that Governor Baker is filing special legislation. And one of those things is to allow the open meeting law to extend for the virtual until September 1st, and also more about the outdoor dining, allowing waivers or whatever it is to continue, I believe also till September 1st. So I'm sure that we'll be getting some news down the pike about that shortly.
Excuse me, Missy.
Mm-hmm.
That, what you just said about September 1st, the open meeting law, does that mean the Zoom meetings that we're doing right now as it stands, unless something changes, currently we will be still doing Zoom until September 1st. Is that what that meant?
Yes, and what I was reading also is there may possibly, oh, Cindy has something. Go ahead, Cindy.
And unless the legislation passes, you won't have that option. You'll have, the legislation is to allow this to continue. But everyone's hopeful and expecting that it will in fact pass, knowing that
Okay.
it's going to take some time for people to transition back to the way meetings were. And I think they're probably looking at what they want to do long term, but everyone's very hopeful that this legislation will do that. And I think on the open dining, it's after September 1st, but I can't access that information and stay on the meeting at the moment.
Yeah, I think it might even go to
November for some
30th,
reason.
something like that. Yeah, something like that.
I think it was basically to try to give the outdoor dining the same benefit it had last year into the fall.
Yeah.
And give towns some time to decide if there's zoning changes that need to be changed to allow it in the future. But that's legislation that everyone is lobbying very hard to say, wait a minute, these are really big issues here and, excuse me, are very important to the economic recovery of all our cities and towns. So we're optimistic that that legislation will pass. And as soon as it does, we'll ship you out what we know.
Thank you. So what was the other thing you said, Missy, that you still get 8 minutes?
Yep, the other thing is it's called the Blackstone Valley Partnership for Local Public Health. As you guys are aware, there was a grant that was available to municipalities, public health. I forget how much the dollar amount, it might be 10 million over 3 years. Mendon is part of that. We are going to be working with 8 other towns, or actually 7 other towns, helping to provide public health services, whether it's, pool inspections, food inspections, whatever the case may be. And I have forwarded you guys an email about some more information,
Right.
job description of a health inspector, the partnership governance, the memo. It's a multiple municipal agreement. Some of this stuff we could possibly have to go to the select board and ask, because it's a municipal shared agreement. We might have to have them also sign on to it. You guys will have to elect someone to be part of the governance board as far as overseeing the people that will be working. So if you guys can take a look at that email I sent out tonight, I forwarded off to you guys, so you'll have a better understanding as what that is going to entail.
All righty.
We are actually really, really excited about it. This will help. During the pandemic, it showed us where some places that we're lacking in, and this is going to help local public health be able to do a lot more. We will have at least one full-time person that will be going out for bid. I believe it's about a $75,000 a year position, and then there's talks of either 2 part-time positions or another full-time position that would also be inspections, but also risk communication. Big thing that I know you guys have all witnessed in the pandemic is having the same consistent messaging. And that's really important, especially in health departments, to have that same consistent information going out. There's also talks about maybe the person can look at Mendon's private well regulations, Northbridge, Upton, pull the towns together. So maybe we also function more evenly and we work similar. Doesn't mean we have to abide by only their, this partnership, but hopefully we can work more cohesively instead of, well, Mendon does this and Upton does that. Try to work more together. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. Andy?
Commonality.
Right.
It'd be great. All too often well, that's not how such and such a town does it. What is that noise? Does anybody else hear it?
I don't know, but there's quite a few people who are not muted.
Okay. All right. So that's all we have currently.
Yes, and I believe Alan has joined us. Alan Greenberg.
Hey, Alan.
Howdy.
Just to bring you up to date, Alan, up to speed, the first order of business was the VNA and the contract. Both Michelle and Ian were present, and Michelle came forward and said that the figure, the $17,500 figure that was on the bill that we balked at was a mistake. She pushed the wrong button. It shouldn't be 17,500. It should be 7,500. So she's going to rectify that, and she's going to send all bills and receipts so that we can see where the money is being spent. The other thing that came up was she wanted to renew the contract with a little bit of extra in case the COVID clinics happened more often and there was a need to have their services. So I suggested, why don't we renew the contract as stated as the normal price, and if in fact you do come in for the clinics, then we can pay the overage. She said, okay, we can do that. That's all good news, and I just wanted to make sure that you were up to speed on that, Alan.
Okay, so the increase from 5,000 to 7,500 is the annual.
Missy, where'd the 5,000 come from? Missy?
Yeah, your current contract with them, I think, is 5,500. And then the additional there was talk on if there, which there probably will be, but additional COVID clinics in the fall when they do their flu clinics. But that's still up in the air.
Okay, so basically we're looking at a $2,000 annual increase, and then there could be additional money charges if we have to run COVID clinics. That's much better than 17.5. Thank you.
You think?
So Andy, that's all I have for you guys as of right now. I don't know if you want to.
Everybody present?
Not yet. Jody Kersey is on now. Mike Maroli is on now. Tom Ryder's on now. And I think that's all that new that I have on top of Alan Greenberg coming in.
Okay, so we're waiting on Gail and John Erickson.
No, Gail is here. We're waiting.
Oh, okay.
Gail and Jean are both here. We're waiting for John Erickson, the building inspector. We're waiting for town administrator Kim Newman, and there's two other selectmen. I'm not sure if they're attending, Lonnie Tinio and Mark Reel, but Mike is here, so.
All right. Congratulations, Mike.
Thanks, Brian.
It's been great to work with you. Been great to work with you over the years on FinCom. Looking forward to working with you here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Very good. Okay, we have 7:30. Do you have 7:30, Missy?
I have 7:29.
Okay.
I can tell you, we had another meeting at 6 that went till just about 7. And the other three you mentioned, Kim and Lonnie and Mark were obviously on that. I expect them to come back. I know we're posted for 7:30 to join your Board of Health meeting.
All right. Well, let's start discussing it. It is 7:30, so we can start discussing the routing slip.
Just to let you, Andy,
Go ahead.
Kim has joined on and Laura has joined on.
Thank you.
You're
welcome,
welcome.
lady. Our discussion this evening is going to be the routing slip that has been in place for many years, and I know other towns use it also. It's been brought to our attention that there's a question as far as the legality of the use of a routing slip. in my opinion, the routing slip is a great tool for certain things that the Board of Health, for one, has need for, because just a simple case would be when a property is sold in the state of Massachusetts, that we need a Title V inspection, and there is no mechanism to enforce this when a property is sold. People have been thumbing their noses at it and not doing anything about it. So we recently had a property that was sold, and the routing slip was generated by the plumbing department because the new owner, wanted to replace the furnace. When the routing slip started to make it through all the proper boards and everything, Missy held it up because we were waiting for a Title V. And we were told that it is against the law to hold this up for hold a permit up for a different board or group that just because of a Board of Health issue. So Cindy, that's why I've asked for you to be here, and Missy has more explanation, please, before you get into your explanation about this. But there's also been another issue as far as a building permit for a roof replacement. And that's where our frustration comes in, because we're being told that it's not legal. Missy, could you please expand on what I've said, please?
Sure. So as everyone's aware, we have a routing slip, and it primarily is started off with the building department. I do one for the Board of Health, and I believe Laura does one for the Select Board. I think everybody can agree that we need to find out what our purpose is for these routing slips, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, how to streamline it so everybody's on the same page. I am the first to admit that I probably hold up more building permits through Viewpoint than any other department, whether it is because if someone's re-roofing their house and they don't mark down how the shingles are being disposed of, the Board of Health needs to know where is it being disposed and who's disposing of it, and are they licensed to haul in the town of Mendon. The other thing that I will hold up for is if someone is redoing their basement or an addition, and I need to make sure and verify with the Board of Health engineer to make sure that their septic system is adequately designed in accordance to Title V. So I will hold up a building permit for that. Whether or not we are legally or allowed to do that, I don't know. And the board and myself figured that this would be a good idea to bring all the different departments who deal with routing slips or issue routing slips to kind of come together and say what should be done or shouldn't be done, and to find out from town council what the legalities of it all is, so to make sure that the town is doing what we're supposed to be doing. Does that pretty much cover it, Andy?
It does. For everyone that's on the board, on the meeting, is everyone aware of the term routing slip, know what it's for? If anyone is not, please raise your hand. Missy will identify you so we can explain what the routing slip is. So I would say everybody does. Jean also has use for a routing slip if a property has back taxes. It could help to recoup. So it's my understanding that Mendon is not the only town around that uses this routing slip. I know Milford does, and there's I believe Upton does too. So I've been told by people in the departments. Cindy, do you have anything to offer for us as far as the legality of these routing slips, please?
Yes, I think there's a lot of reasons that you can use routing slips, and I think a lot of the purposes you've cited are good ones. I think there's a distinction between denying a building permit, and taking the time to look in to see what else needs to be done. In terms of denying a permit, that's set out very narrowly and with a very specific process in Chapter 40, Section 57, which the town has in fact adopted, and has Chapter 19 in your bylaws that sets out exactly what the law says and what you can and cannot do. You cannot deny a permit unless the process has been followed. and the process is limited to denying a permit if someone has neglected or refused to pay any local taxes, fees, assessments, betterments, or other municipal charges. And then there's a list of things at the end of your bylaw that you can't deny it for, like if you haven't paid your fishing license, your marriage license, theatrical events, clubs or associations, those types of, not to belittle them, but that aren't really large in terms of financial amounts. It's really a way to get the attention of the people who aren't paying taxes, betterments, the big bills they're supposed to be paying. And to do that, there is a process, and it starts with the treasurer collector annually sending out a list of people who have been negligent or deficient on these things for a year. So if that hasn't happened, you cannot deny a permit under your bylaw or under Chapter 40, Section 57. So the legality of using a routing slip in that regard is very narrowly defined, and you have a bylaw in place that says when you can and cannot use a routing slip for that purpose. The routing slip is the mechanism that when a permit comes up, you notified all the potentially affected boards. So if someone's on this list and hasn't paid, so the relevant board or commission can weigh in and say, no, 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 not until X, Y, or Z is taken care of. But I don't think that's really the issue that the Board of Health is having right now, or the rest of the town. I think it's that gray area of, like Missy said, you get a routing slip and you hold it up. I'm not quite sure what that means by hold it up. I'm not quite sure how long you're looking at, but I do think it's lawful to send the routing slip when you get a building permit to all boards and commissions that may have a need to go, whoa, we better take a look at what's going on in our jurisdictions before they get their building permit. Okay, so independent of your bylaw in Chapter 50, I think there's a legitimate reason to have the routing slips to be a notification red flag type of scenario. So if, for example, the Board of Health says, oh, we need to see if there's Title V system in place that's the right size. Now, in theory, I can't imagine that you're going to get a building permit without having gone to get your Title V permit or gone through all the other hoops you have to do to get to the point of getting your building permit. So in some respects, this should have happened or be happening. But if it doesn't, it's a time for the Board of Health to say, red flag, where's the Title V compliance? Do you have what you need for Title V? And to require the person to come before you to do what they need to do, and to red flag for the building inspector, but wait a minute, they may be saying they've done everything, but we don't have any record of them having come before us for whatever Title V they may need. So I think there's a difference in how you use a routing slip, and I think that might be where some of the confusion comes.
Andy, I believe Dan has a question.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was gonna, and I think Cindy actually just touched on this. I do think part of the confusion here is coming from the terminology that our software is using. And unfortunately, we're limited in the functionality of Viewpoint. You know, it comes to the Board of Health and you can say yes or no. And so, or reject. And so I think there's confusion that, you know, yes, you're technically hitting the reject button, but the building department and the building inspector can go in, they can override and say, nope, this is not a legitimate reason. So you're not legally stopping that permit, you're just stopping it in the software. And maybe that's also something that is a point of confusion.
Andy, Jean also has a question.
Welcome, Jean.
How you doing? Good hearing
Good.
your voices after a long time.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to give a little bit of background on this. First of all, let me preface this by saying that I truly believe that when there's various departments involved in a process, that if you're going to alter that process at all or discontinue it, that consideration should be given to at least talk to those departments. There is a history here of our routing slips. It started off with, of course, that bylaw about paying the taxes. Originally, the treasurer collector was supplying a list to the various departments. However, there were too many things falling through the cracks because unless you supply a list every day, you're not going to get all of the people who were past due in their taxes. The assessor's office only got involved when, after the process broke down and permits were getting through with people who owed taxes, that they decided to choose this routing slip. And they asked our office to be involved only not to approve. We don't have anything to do with approving permits, but we make sure that the name, the address, and if there's vital information about any other things like personal property taxes that I might know about before the treasurer collector gets it. So she's not looking at trying to find a name that it doesn't exist or an address that doesn't exist. So we merely make sure everything on that routing slip is correct, and then we forward it on to the treasurer collector for them to sign off on the taxes.
All good info. Thank you very much, Jean.
Thank you.
Cindy, I've got a question for you, Cindy. If I understood you correctly in the beginning of your conversation, you said that, and I think Jean just touched upon it again, that in order for the routing slip to be legally used, notification has to be sent to a property owner that they are in violation of some sort, whether it's taxes, Title V inspection for a new sale or something like that. We have to actually have a notification sent before the routing slip is valid. Is that correct?
No, that's not quite right. And Jean's touched on some things that are accurate and some things that have sort of helped to lead to, there's by law, if you're going to use the routing slip to deny someone a building permit, the treasurer collector must annually submit a list. Oh, and they must put that person's name on the list. Otherwise, you cannot deny them for that. That being said, the routing slip is a perfectly legitimate tool of municipal government to alert boards to, oh, whoa, wait a minute, there's some wetlands issues here or some Title V issues here. They need this before they can go forward. And it's a reason to alert the building inspector and the property owner that even though you can't deny it under the state statute and your bylaw, they don't have everything they need. And they need to come before local boards to get what they need in order to get a building permit. So it's not, Chapter 40, Section 57 is not the only way that someone doesn't get a building permit. I mean, the building inspector looks at the building permit and makes sure they've done everything they need. You know, do they have whatever zoning relief they need? Oh, is there a Title V? You know, you have to go through these hoops. But in order to deny the permit for failure to pay something, it's got to be on a list annually. But there's a million other reasons for a building inspector to deny a building permit that have nothing to do with non-payment of fees and taxes. And all those independent reasons for a building inspector to deny a building permit are out there and are sometimes legitimately flagged by these routing slips where a board will go, wait a minute, building inspector, did you know X, Y, or Z? So I think there's confusion that people try to collapse the use and validity of a routing slip into whether it can be used to deny the permit. And according to your bylaw, which is consistent with the statute, there's a very set process that you cannot deviate from if you're going to deny it for non-payment of these types of things. Okay? And you can't change it. It's set in state statute. But that's completely independent of any other ground a building inspector. In fact, 90% of times I would bet, and I hope the building inspector is here to talk about this a bit, you know, 90% of the times when a building inspector denies a building permit, it's not because of non-payment of taxes under Chapter 40. It's because of some substantive reason that the permit shouldn't issue at that point in time. And nothing about the use of a routing slip or non-use of a routing slip adds or detracts from his ability to look at an application for a building permit and say, yes, you're entitled to one, or no, you're not. The only additional thing is if they are on this annual list, they can be denied because they haven't paid town taxes. Does that help?
It does. One scenario in particular, the first one that started to come up as a situation was a plumbing permit was requested from the
Andy?
plumbing department. Go ahead, Missy.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but John Erickson has joined us and someone by the name of Jerry has joined us. And John actually has his hand up. So I don't know if you want to recognize John as he is the building inspector.
Welcome, John. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can you all hear me or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I apologize, I'm late. I had this on my calendar for tomorrow night, and I didn't realize the schedule change. And I also was expecting an invite, which is my bad. I didn't realize I could just log on from the Board of Health. So I apologize for tuning in late. And I did just hear Cindy's explanation, which very quickly I agree 100% with, as far as, you know, whether the building official can deny a permit based on past taxes. I think some of the other things that you mentioned need to be discussed very specifically on when a permit can be turned down legally. And then there's, I'm going to kind of cover a lot in a little bit, I think. There's the question of a routing slip and what is it doing? And I apologize, I missed the first few minutes of this conversation. But I think this meeting tonight is inspired by the software and the fact that the inspectors have not been able to issue permits in some cases until other town departments release it, for lack of a better description. And that's where the problem has lied for me and the inspectors within the department, including plumbing and gas and electric. So I don't know if we want to pause and tell me where to start my conversation or which questions to answer or where to go from here. And to me, a routing slip is more of an informational process. But what is happening with our Viewpoint software is doesn't appear to me to be a routing slip. And when I inquired about, you know, what the software can do, the answer was the other departments can either be included and then they have to approve it before it can progress. In other words, they can't just be notified that a project's going to take place on a property, or at least not automatically through Viewpoint, is the information that I received.
John, and Cindy has her hand up, and I believe Dan does too. I might be mistaken. Cindy?
I was going to say, this is not a problem unique to Viewpoint or the building inspector in this issue. I encountered this with other software. Munis is the biggest problem on the planet in my mind for a whole host of things unrelated to what we're talking about. But it seems to me that a lot of your problems may be stemming from this software. And, you know, John, you may kill me for this, but is there a way to have the routing slip not go through that software so it can not interfere with your ability to lawfully issue or deny a permit, but you get the information you need? Can you just take it out of that system and do it separately? And Dan, that might fall on your lap.
If I can comment, so John touched on part of what I was going to say. Unfortunately, the verbiage and the functionality of the software is limited. I think within Viewpoint, the only option that might help some of this, there's a way to set due dates and set it so the approval step automatically approves. So the step goes to the Board of Health. Board of Health has 2 days to respond. And if at the end of the second day, it automatically flips to green and it moves on. So within Viewpoint, I think that's probably the only way to address this, you know, in the software, if that's helpful. I guess before I would say though, it is very valuable to have everything in one place. So if there's a way, either through Viewpoint or another program, I know, John, we talked about that. I think this has been really helpful everything's in one place. The customer sees all the comments. If somebody has a question, they can ask the customer, whatever that solution ends up being.
Andy, I just want to kind of go back, just because now John is with us, and let him know where we came from with all of this, if I could.
Go ahead.
So John, as you're well aware, the whole, viewpoint, the routing slip and everything, the Board of Health does a routing slip, the Select Board does a routing slip, and you guys do a routing slip. I probably hold up, most of the time, it's probably Board of Health that's holding up a building permit. And that's one of the reasons why we're kind of calling this meeting, to get everybody's input, to try to find out what are you supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, how do we streamline it, how do we get everybody on the same page? Like I explained earlier, I will hold up a building permit if there is a addition or an alteration of some sort to verify that the septic system is satisfied, that it's okay for that to proceed. The other thing is if someone's re-roofing, the Board of Health wants to know where is the roofing shingles going and is it a licensed hauler? Things of that nature. So I just kind of wanted to bring up most of it is through Viewpoint and most of it is through the building department, but the Select Board and the Board of Health do routing slips. And is there a better way, a more streamlined way to get everybody on the same page? Thanks, Andy.
Before we go any further, I would like to ask, I think I'm missing something. The routing slip is a mechanism in place to help get everybody compliant with all issues, regardless what the board, what the entity is. So when a routing slip gets held up, isn't that situation supposed to be rectified before a building permit could be released, because the Board of Health doesn't have a Title V inspection or doesn't have whatever we need? Isn't this supposed to be fixed before the routing slip, the permits can be issued, whatever the issue is? Cindy,
Andy,
could you answer that, please?
you're on mute, Cindy, I think.
I think I'd like to hear John's answer first, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Stu. Andy, what I was going to suggest is that maybe we're talking in very broad strokes here. If we could maybe compartmentalize the discussion to each individual, in a broad sense, what are we trying to do with a routing slip? But then compartmentalize the conversation a little bit as far as each department, because what I do is, and again, this will be general, but as an example, yes, they need to prove, in general, an applicant needs to prove proper sewage disposal as a condition of a building permit. And there's some cases where you can allow for phased submittals, but in general, yes, you need to provide, proof of sewer and water at various stages, water in the beginning and sewer before the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So that is a condition. I don't think the Board of Health actually has the authority to withhold the permit. It's the building commissioner, but we would rely on information that we get through the Board of Health, working, directly and collaboratively. When you look at a different situation, and this is not always followed in every town, but the building official does not have the authority to withhold a building permit if an applicant needs to file for conservation. Conservation Commission is a separate entity with their own, I can't never say this word right, adjudicatory authority, adjudication. Maybe help me out with that, Cindy, or just everybody ignore my mispronunciation. But we don't have the authority. If you want to build a house on a lot that has wetlands and you're within the distance, 100 or 200 feet or whatever it is, we cannot withhold the permit because you didn't file conservation. You would have to go file conservation. But this gets to the routing slip. Of course, we want to work all departments together so that the other departments know what's happening. And even if that's a routing slip that goes out initially before we act on the building permit, it's not something we could withhold. Or if we withheld it and we were contested, we'd be found, that we didn't act properly. And that's something that's come up at regular discussions in the building officials meetings throughout the years.
If I could just interject, I mean, that's the perfect example of where a routing slip is really doing its job, because it's alerting the Concom to go after this person. Because even if they have their building permit, if they don't have their order of conditions to do the work, they can get in trouble and get stopped by the Concom. So in that example, and my bad for using conservation as an example, that I shouldn't have. That's where a routing slip is, in my mind, among its most effective, because it's giving a heads up to those other boards and commissions that have jurisdiction to do something and keep an eye out and notify. And so that if they put spade in the ground and they haven't got their permission, you have the authority to go stop them on your own jurisdiction. But to me, that's the best use of the routing slip, is to notify and give everybody a heads up that this project is coming, to make sure that the applicant has in fact crossed all its T's and dotted all its I's. I never get that phrase right. So I agree with what John said.
Thank you. What about some situations that the Board of Health has in place? And it's not just Board of Health, it's just about every entity out there. There has to be some kind of mechanism in place to enforce things that are required. And these are not, what we're asking about is not amending Board of Health bylaw. It's Massachusetts Title V. A property sells and we don't get a Title V inspection, which is by Title V law supposed to happen within 6 months of the sale of the property. And nobody does it, that we have nothing to enforce it. Yet they come to do a job at that house, whether it's plumbing, building for a roof, an addition, whatever. It comes through us and we say no. It's not that it was denied, it was held up because we want the issue rectified. Is that a correct use of the routing slip, Cindy? John first, please.
Yeah, so I would say in that case, Andy, no, it's not. We don't have the authority for plumbing, gas, electrical, or building to withhold certain types of permits for them not having that Title V certificate or inspection or whatever they're required. I mean, if somebody wants to change their roof and we denied them, that's in my opinion, it's we didn't make the right decision. And if we were contested, I would expect the building board to rule against that decision. So I know what happens is it's a good mechanism if you can use it, but I don't think it's right or legal in many situations. Certainly if they wanted to put an addition on and they were going to add a bedroom or whatever would require us to review the sewage disposal, or then yes, but as a blanket, I would say no.
Okay.
As far as what the mechanism is for enforcement from the health department, I don't have that answer, of course.
There are a few things that we might as well just throw Title V out because there is no enforcement mechanism for us. Cindy, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I was going to say, I agree with John. You couldn't hold up the building permit because it's not something you could hold up a building permit for. I would have to go back and look at Title V and what your remedies are. I'm fairly confident once you found out about it, you could bring a civil action requiring them to do it. I think the most likely scenario is the person who bought the house is going to want to do work and then find their Title V system isn't compliant and they're going to get held up, and then it's a private lawsuit.
Okay, thank you. Tom Ryder, are you here?
Likely to happen?
Yes, I'm here.
Have you been listening to the conversation? Were you back long enough to hear the conversation?
Yes, I'm listening on it. So a case where somebody's looking to add rooms or bedrooms that may by Title V constitute an increase of design flow would require an upgrade of the septic system. So am I hearing that that the building department technically could not withhold the permit until the until the Board of Health issues a certificate of compliance or building, our septic system disposal construction permit.
We're talking about an existing property where a house was sold, an existing property, not new construction, and a Title V was not done on the property.
But if I can add, it's not the case where they want to add a bedroom or even living space. We're talking they want to fix their roof or put in a new heating system.
Yes.
That doesn't impact the Title V at all. And when you buy and sell a house, I mean, that's one of the requirements that's supposed to be dealt with is, your Title V compliance certificate. So if someone didn't get one, then that's on the two parties that were buying or selling the property. And the remedy is likely to be a private one because either someone's going to try to do something or you're going to have a failed system and the Board of Health will go in on its own jurisdiction to require the new owner to fix it, or the new owner is going to want to do something that's going to require an upgrade to the system and they're going to be in trouble. So the law is designed so it's supposed to be taken care of before the sale can occur. And so the parties aren't doing their due diligence if that doesn't happen at that point. But if it's a failed system, you're going to know about it soon enough, and then the person who purchased the property is going to be on the hook and really upset, and then they can go after their seller.
Cindy, when we run into this, 1 minute, Mr. Bruce. When we run into this is if there's a bank involved, then obviously the Title V process is taken care of and is done. When we run into it is when someone buys a property out of pocket and there is no bank involved, a private sale. That process they thumb their nose at this process. You'd be amazed at how many times it's happened just in the years I've been on the board that I've heard about it, and people don't do anything about it. And it's frustrating because we have no enforcement. Go ahead,
But
Missy.
you have enforcement when they want to do something requiring a permit from you.
That's what happened.
You have authority when they want to put an addition on, when they want to expand their house, when they want to tear down their house and put up a McMansion. Then you have authority. If the system fails, then you have authority. But you're right. If they want to fix their roof, it would be effectively no different than if there was no sale. You wouldn't have any jurisdiction to require the owner to fix their septic before they fix their roof, because they're not doing anything to impact the Title V system.
Okay.
Andy?
Missy, you had something?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. Actually, I just want to let you know that Lonnie has joined the meeting. Jody has her hand up. Lonnie did at one point in time, but I don't know if he has any questions or not. But I do want to ask John, because I want to make sure that I am doing the right thing with the building department and for the Board of Health. So if someone comes in, pulls a permit, they're going to re-roof their house. Okay. And I say, okay, how is it going to be disposed and who's disposing of it? And they say, I'm re-roofing my own house and I'm disposing of it. Is that it? Can I just say, okay, thank you very much? Or do I have the okay to say, nope, you need to let us know who the hauling, because anyone hauling offensive material has to be licensed in the town of Mendon. Can you answer that for me, John? Because typically if someone tells me they're going to re-window, we're going to replace a couple of windows, I don't hold it up. If they're going to do minor things, I don't hold it up. Someone's doing insulation, but it really comes down to re-siding the whole house, re-windowing the whole house, or re-roofing the house is when I have a tendency to hold it up. And if that is wrong, let me know and I will stop doing it. I just want clarification, that's all. And then I would turn it over to Andy to ask Jody her question and Lonnie. Thank you.
So, Missy, to answer that, I don't think that. So, let me back up a second. There is an affidavit that a building permit applicant is supposed to fill out with regard to stating where the debris is being disposed and stating that it's being at a licensed, and I'm not going to get the wording right, I don't have it in front of me, but it's out of the Mass General Law. I think it's Section 54, and I can't remember the chapter. But it's the same one that requires, potable water at a building that's going to use water. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. But so there's a requirement for the applicant to fill out the debris disposal affidavit. So it's something that if they didn't do that, the building official has the authority to, not only the authority, the obligation to withhold or not issue the permit until that's satisfied. As far as the Board of Health or you as an agent of the Board of Health, I don't think that you actually have that authority, but it is the responsibility of the building commissioner or the building official to make sure that the affidavit's filled out or the information is filled out as to where the debris is being disposed of. And then there's a separate entity of the licensing of the Board of Health of debris haulers. I'm not, I would be pretty confident in saying that the building official doesn't have the authority to withhold that, but that's just another regulation that, I understand is difficult for you to enforce.
Mm-hmm. No, and like I said, I'm just asking so that I'm doing the right thing. So if it's decided that no, you can't legally or you can't through the building department hold up, reject, whatever the wording you want to put on it, but it's the building permit process is stopped because I've done that. Let me know. Like I said, I try not to do it for simple things like insulation, but just total re-roof, total, things like that. And Cindy has her hand up.
Missy, I don't think it's a clear black and white answer. I think part of the problem is, as Dan said, your software doesn't give you the right options. I mean, I think when you get something that someone's doing a roof, you have every right to tell them what your regulations are about haulers and who they have to use to haul it, and to tell them they need to make sure they give you the information about what they're doing. And I think a lot of times you may find that people just don't know that, and that when you give them that information, they will comply. Whether you have enforcement or not, that's another issue, and maybe we need to look at your regulations, and maybe it should be a bylaw, and that's a whole different topic. But I think John's right. And I think some of the problem comes up with the terminology hold up versus deny, reject. And I think they mean different things at different times. And I think part of that is, in fact, software related. I think you have every right to ask the applicant, independent of his building permit application, what are your plans for this? Are you aware of our regulations? Where's the proof of your licensed hauler? Because if they're in violation then when they're doing this, then you can go in and enforce or shut them down for not complying with your own bylaws down the road. But in terms of holding up a building permit at the front end, I don't see any authority that allows you to do that.
Okay, no problem. Andy, if you want to respond, but Jody had her hand up.
Yes, I heard you. Thank you. Jody, welcome.
Thank you. I'll just say hello. Yeah, so I basically I wanted to get back to the legality of the issue around just denying a building permit. And from what I'm understanding, and Cindy, please weigh in and correct me if I've misunderstood along the way here, but legally, the treasurer collector, who's myself, has the authorization to be the one to legally deny a permit based on taxes owed over a year. Am I correct?
You have the ability and the authority to put together an annual list stating those people who are in violation of all of those taxes, assessments, betterments, and the building inspector can deny a building permit based on someone being on that list and not paying or not making an arrangement to come into compliance. Yes.
Okay.
So if I can sort of clarify, that's something that the building official would have the responsibility or authority to deny, based on the information that the collector provides the official.
I'm sorry. Correct. I misspoke.
Okay.
You're correct. I misspoke. Yes, the finance director does not do any denial of a building permit. You give the information.
Okay.
The building inspector relies on.
And then there's a formal process based on the Mendon bylaw, the Mass General law that the collector has to follow, none of which frankly would be my concern if I get the list.
Correct.
I'm going to assume it was compiled in the right way.
Correct. I misunderstood, Jody. I'm sorry if I misled you.
No, that's okay. I know that
Job.
these routing slips come, right, yeah, and that's fine. And I can, look to my peer group too, as far as best practices around that particular list and what it should entail. I have some other questions about it with regards to it being a rolling year, or is it within a fiscal year from said date to said date every year? I mean, I need to dig into that a little bit more in order to provide John and his department the correct information.
I would, my understanding, and I would have to check more deeply into this, but an annual list to me is at the end of the fiscal year, those people who are still owing.
Gene, could you chime in on that, please? Gene probably has that answer.
You think I have that answer?
It's
No?
not a rolling
It
list.
does not specify in the bylaw or the law. And that was the problem, because Jody could run a list today.
Right.
Tomorrow, someone could be a year past due that's not on that list.
And then that list doesn't get refreshed for another year.
Right, so that's where a lot of things are falling through the crack. Let me ask you this. If we changed our bylaw, the terminology in the bylaw regarding the process by which this is done, would that make a difference?
That would depend on what you wanted to change it to do.
Well, I know that some towns require a person before they even apply for a building permit to have a certificate of good standing, which to me is a lot more onerous on the person because they have to go to the treasurer collector's office, have her sign a slip before they can even apply for a permit. But I know many of the towns that I've spoken to do this routing slip.
I don't have a problem, as I said, with the use of a routing slip. I think it comes down to how you want to use the routing slip. And I think it, in some levels, it depends on, what you really want to do. Do you want to really make it I don't know that you can make it a rolling annual list. I mean, usually an annual list is once a year. If you're on the list, it's like, if you haven't paid your taxes for a year, after a year, the tax collector has rights and responsibilities that they can do. And I view this as the same, but in terms of whether you have any ability to change when that annual list is, I'd have to get back to you.
Andy, Lonnie has a question.
Hi, Lonnie, welcome.
Hey guys, sorry I was late. Something came up. So anyway, as far as the list here in question with unpaid taxes, with the list being kind of, well, I guess once we find out what that list is, whether it's rolling or, just a one-time list that still can change if the taxes get paid, would it still make sense to not do a list, leave Jody in the loop of the process? She can just look and say, nope, there's nothing over a year old for this parcel, and off it goes. Okay, Cindy, yeah, sorry.
In the event that it works out that way, yes. But if you, in that process, discover that there is a problem, then you would be out of compliance with the state statute because she will not have compiled an annual list. So if everything works great, that process is fine. But if there's a problem, you can't do anything about it.
All right, anybody else with their hand up?
I just had one more question. If building upon Lonnie's idea of being in compliant with the annual list, right? So for dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making that list available and having it on file, so to speak, can we still allow the office to be part of that process to look at any real-time taxes that are overdue that otherwise may have just slipped through the cracks for 364 days until the next list gets run? Can we make it stricter than the Mass General Law in terms of that's our baseline, but then we can add that process to it? I'm just throwing that out there as kind of coupling with, with still running that list.
I don't think you have the authority to go after anyone or deny them a permit if they have not been delinquent for a year.
Right. Okay.
I can look into see whether you can actually have a rolling year, although I think that would be a logistical nightmare. even if
Yes, it would be.
But, you know, the person's gonna be out of compliance with their taxes, assessments, or betterments for a year, or you can't hold them up. So I think the reality of the situation is there probably aren't that many situations where someone's not paying their taxes over the course of the year, but they're going to build a brand new McMansion. I don't see this coming up practically as a regular issue in my cities and towns. You really, you just like, you know, when someone's delinquent on the taxes, you have a very specific process you have to follow about when they are declared delinquent, how much time, and when it comes to pass. And the statute, unfortunately, however vague it may be, is very specific in what it says. And unfortunately, unless you really want to be a test case, which I don't think you do, I don't think that you can do anything if it's 364 days.
So that side of this is pretty clear then. I mean, it's pretty clear. It seems like the other issue is all of the ancillary things that are also problematic for the town, that are a separate conversation, really.
And those are more the, how do you want to use your routing slip for informational purposes, heads up flag purposes, for sharing knowledge, to making sure that someone hasn't lied on an affidavit because you happen to know there's nothing in your file and they've said they've done it. So it's very effective as a tool to help the town keep its, you know, it's a handle on what people are doing on their property, but it's limited in terms of lawfully what it can do.
Andy, Tom Fickner has his hand up. John Erickson has his hand up. Jean has her hand up, and at one point Dan had his. So I think you should yield the floor to Tom.
You're the boss. Tom Fickner.
So as I've tried to understand this process, am I hearing it correctly that based on the current statute, that a town does not have the ability to run this list more than once a year, that it has to be a once a year type of a deal? Is that correct?
That's my understanding of the law, and I've not seen anything to the contrary.
Could I jump in, because this is what I had my hand up for?
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. I was just going to reference, you know, just quickly, it's Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 57, and it's also amended General Bylaw. And I'm not trying to play counsel by any stretch. And it's so it's our General Bylaw, which also references the procedures in there. And it says, you know, there's a whole bunch of procedures that the collector has to do to generate the list, such as holding hearings and giving the people proper notification. It's not something that would just come up when a permit's applied for. But it also says, it says something to the effect of shall annually and may periodically. So my question is, maybe that may periodically allows you to do it quarterly or monthly. I'm not sure, but it says shall annually, and this is just off the top of my head, but I just Googled it real quick, you know, 5 minutes ago. And they don't have it up on the screen right this second, but so I would question that maybe it does allow you to do it more periodically, and at that point I'll step away and defer to Cindy.
I don't see exactly where you're referencing the more than annually, and I've not seen it applied that way, but I'm happy to take a closer look. I'm looking at it and says, treasurer collector shall annually furnish to each department, blah, 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 that has neglected or refused to pay any local taxes, fees, assessments, betterments, or other municipal charges for not less than a 12-year month period, and that is not filed in good faith the pending applications for an abatement. I'm willing to look more deeply into this. I've not seen anyone try to apply it the way you're suggesting. And I've not seen, and I don't see your bylaw written to do that. And I think Jody may run for the hills if you decide that's the way you want to go. And then you run a logistical nightmare of you've got to be real careful if you start having a rolling annual list that you get absolutely everyone treated the exact same way. I don't see that you can do it unless I just don't see it, but I'm happy to take a closer look.
So what I was referencing is the next paragraph down where it says the collector, and I'm not saying that, I'm deferring to your knowledge, but it says the tax collector or other municipal official responsible for records of all municipal taxes, assessments, betterments, and other municipal charges hereinafter referred to as the tax collector shall annually and may periodically furnish to each department, board, commission, or division, and then it goes on and on. So that's the only part I was referencing, and I'm certainly not trying to argue that
that's okay.
Or should do it more.
I'm still not seeing it, but I think that's referencing that even if the list is compiled annually, you can remind people of it on a regular basis.
Works for me, like I said,
But I'm happy
on that topic.
I've not seen it interpreted that way, and I'm
Can I just chime in here for a minute? Can I chime in here for just a minute?
Sure.
Please.
I think we have an issue of a town bylaw versus a state law. The Mendon town bylaw is written that they have to be at least a year past due. The state law does not specify a time period, so they could be a day past due as far as the state law. Further, the state law does say the list can be issued periodically. Our bylaw only speaks to annual. That's why I asked if the bylaw could be changed to maybe come more into suit with the state law. Because here's where the confusion is. People are reading the state law, other people are reading the town bylaw.
The town bylaw governs at the moment. The town bylaw, I have not seen the state bylaw interpreted that way. That's not to say it could not be. I'd have to look at that in more detail and get back to you.
I know other towns do interpret that law that way, and I know the town of Uxbridge, if you're a week past due, you can be denied.
I don't know if it's been challenged. I'm happy to take a closer look at it. And if the town wants to try to revise their bylaw, I'm happy to look at it. But it speaks to an annual list.
Right.
And even if you can remind people more often than that, all I can say is I'm happy to look into it, and I'm happy to call GOR and see what they say. But I've not seen that in my practice. That doesn't mean I know everything or that it hasn't happened. I'm happy to talk to DOR and see what they say.
Andy, Lonnie, and Mike, Maroli, and Dan all have their hands up. And Tom, I don't know if you finished.
Tom, are you done?
Well, so just so we're kind of all on the same page, I just want to just get a confirmation here based on the individual's recitation of information here. So based on what John was reading, and based on what Cindy was reading, and based on what Jean is saying, are these individuals reading from different bylaw pieces of information? Is one looking at the state and one looking at the local, or is there not an agreement to what is being stated on this call? Can you clarify? So Cindy, what are you reading from? Are you reading the town bylaw?
I have looked at the state statute. At the moment, I'm reading from your bylaw.
Okay, you're reading the town. So the moment you're reading the town bylaw. And John, what are you?
Chapter 19, delinquency of for license and permit holders.
So John, what were you reading from?
So I was reading just a Google search, so the unofficial version of Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 57. So I was not reading the same as Cindy. And
Okay.
I'm not trying to be an authority on it. I was just, the
No,
phrase
understood.
came up, so that's the only highlight I wanted to make, not much more on this.
Nope. Understood. I just wanted to get clarification so everyone understands what folks are reading from. And what Jean seems to be saying is that there is a difference between the two. Is that correct, Jean? Between state and local?
Yes, the town was more specific in a time frame and a process, where the state gives a little bit more leniency to it, to the time frame. It says whenever they're past due. It doesn't say for a year. And then it does say the treasurer collector can periodically give a list. It doesn't have to be an annual.
Okay, so I guess that would just kind of leave it open, and that would be for further discussion with the powers that be here as to whether or not there'd be consideration for wanting to potentially change the town bylaw to run in sync, so to speak, with the state. Okay, back to you, Andy. Thank you all.
Dan, you've been waiting a while, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, now that I'm hearing all this, I think there were changes to this law as part of the Municipal Modernization Act. I think Jen may have been looking into this way pre-COVID, and then it got tabled. I think they changed what the town is allowed to do. I don't know if we had to go back to town meeting, but there may be some more options here. And then again, I would just add, I think, I understand the whole idea of an annual list and all, but I think if there's a way to use Viewpoint to communicate that, it's more efficient than asking somebody to manually cross-reference a list and maybe the name doesn't match up because somebody pulled the permit, but they're not the owner. So I think that was the benefit of operating through Viewpoint, and then it's up to the building department to override that or accept what they've been told, I guess.
Andy, Lonnie, and Mike will have questions.
Mike Maroli, please.
Well, my understanding of this is that term about the periodically updated list is treated by a lot of treasurer collectors offices as a continually updated list, which is why they have that certificate of compliance. When somebody wants a building permit, they get a certificate that says, that they are in compliance. And the reason for the assessor being involved is if somebody tries to do work on one property, the assessor can verify all of the other properties they own property in the town so that all of the taxes are paid. And that's my understanding. And obviously, I've had these conversations over time with the previous treasurer collector and with the assistant, who happens to be my son and works in Grafton now. This just came up over a year ago when it was discussed that rather than issuing a list once a year, it was a list that included anybody who was past due within the year, which is why it's continually updated and they provide a certificate of compliance. But I think it would be a great idea to have town council check, because the last thing you want to do is make it tougher for somebody to build in the town. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're collecting the tax that's due. And certainly somebody might be delinquent some, but I think a year is a reasonable number, and that's one that the state lays out there. But that's just my comment.
Lonnie?
Sorry, Cindy had her hand up. I'll defer to Cindy for a moment.
I was just going to say, I'm looking at the statute, and it does say annually and may periodically furnish each department, board, or commission a list. So you have to have this list compiled at least annually, and your bylaw requires only annually. And you still need to have the list compiled. So you have to keep that in mind when you're asking whether you want the treasurer collector to compile a list every day, every quarter, and you still have to go through the process of giving people notice and an opportunity to be heard and to address this before you can act on it. So if you want to make any change, there's a whole host of issues that are still open and aren't resolved, and including what the statute will allow in terms of may be more periodic, and you will, at a minimum, need a bylaw amendment and you will need to have some sort of process that is consistent with the state and complying this list. And then how are you going to implement it fairly? But right now, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what's on the books and what you can do. Excuse me. And how you can use your routing slips. I don't see, and I haven't heard anyone say that there's been occasion where people are falling through the cracks on their taxes and getting building permits. I've been hearing that there's other issues that people don't seem to be complying with. And how can you use your routing slip for that? And I think those are very different questions. And what is clear is you can't deny the building permit if the person otherwise meets the requirements for getting a building permit, which includes a whole host of issues that the building inspector knows better than all of us, and whether they appear on this list, and whether they've been afforded a process. So whether you choose to change that, and I'm not even sure how much more periodically you can, or what makes sense in a town your size. Right now, the issue seems to be the software as it's programmed, where a board may legitimately want to say, hold on a second, let me look into this. It's operating as a denial, and that you can't do. And that, I think, is what you need to fix immediately. And I don't know if it's a software fix. Dan seemed to have some ideas that may work. And the routing slip as used, for what I hear in the town of Mendon, predominantly as a red flag to other boards that there's issues here. And there's your own jurisdiction as different boards affecting the development of a property that kick in independently of the building permit. And this bylaw and this provision does not impact that in the least. So I think the bigger issue, what you're facing right now, is what role do you want your routing slips to do? And without a compiled list, you cannot rely on this bylaw to deny or use the routing slip to deny a permit. Now, the building inspector can, has a million reasons to deny a permit. That's, in a nutshell, where I see us at the moment.
Thank you. Lonnie, you want to continue?
Sorry, yeah, just a quick question. Do we know how many permits have been denied, or how many or held up due to taxes? Is it a big number? Like, do we have like a count for a year or over a 5-year period or anything like that? I'm just wondering how, not that we shouldn't be looking at it, and I would kind of say that, along with that ruling and any other ruling that we have for denials or delays, that we would just maybe err on the side of caution and go on the more lenient side of things, only to maybe stop any lawsuits that may come up. Just a suggestion, but again, I was wondering if does anybody have a count really, and how big of an issue that is. Oh, I got it.
Lonnie, I just put it in the chat. There are no permits held up by the treasurer collector in Viewpoint currently. So whatever things they may or may not have held have been resolved in some fashion. Either no permit was issued, it was stopped. I don't know that. This list is empty.
Thank you.
But I'll keep looking.
Andy, Mike Maroli has his hand up, Gail has her hand up, and John Erickson has his hand up.
That's a mistake. Mike Morales taking his hand down.
He's just waving hi. John Erickson, please.
I was just going to answer to Dan's point just now. There wouldn't be any permits held up right now because the treasurer was removed from the workflow a few weeks ago. But to my recollection, I don't think we've had anything that was officially held up, maybe just effectively because somebody may have been out for a day or something like that. But I wanted to circle back just a little bit to Cindy's point. The problem really is, I think, a lot of the problem is the software, because this is, Viewpoint is permitting software. It's really not department management software. It's designed, you have to issue a permit. What are the steps? They assign them to one or more individuals, and when they're clear, the permit's issued. But we're trying to do more than, I think, just issue a permit. And if we weren't trying to do more than just issue a permit, all of this conversation would go away eventually. But I think we're trying to do more. So I think, that's what when I said earlier, this may not be the night for this, but if we can compartmentalize each department and what we're trying to do, I think we can come to solutions on most of the issues anyways.
Thank you. Gail?
Hi, I just wanted a couple of comments. And I'm nervous. This is the first time I've done this, speaking like this, but the permits come to me first. And I found it very helpful for the Board of Assessors and for the Treasurer Collector to be in the routing slip. I know they were taken down, but I would really like to get them back up there. It helps me. They have never really denied or stopped any permits. If there was any issues, then I would see them, and I would, whatever it had to be, I would, call whoever is applying for the permits. I feel that both the assessors and the treasurer collector are a good idea on the routing slips. And as poor Missy said before, she is mostly the one that holds up the permits. And, we have discussed it many times, why it is. And we have tried to rectify the situation as fast as we can so that the permit can be issued. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Missy,
Andy,
is anybody?
John Erickson has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Missy. Thank you, Andy. What Gail just described is the inherent problem that we have. We're holding up permits and applications that for reasons we do not have the authority to. And it's really that simple. And it's something that I can't compromise my professional licensure and integrity and get challenged and say, I held up a permit for a reason A, B, or C, when I know full well I don't have the authority to do that. So that's what I'm trying to overcome here. I know it's great to use the building department if you can to solve other problems, but that only works for me if we have the authority. So, frankly, Gail just highlighted the biggest problem I have with the processes that have been in place.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for all your input tonight. It's been very informative for me, and I'm sure for everybody else. I don't know if we solved any issues, but we certainly have talked about a lot, and I don't know what the answer is, but hopefully we're getting closer to a smoother operation, whether it's software or whether it's the bylaws or whatever it is. But I feel that this has been a very constructive meeting, and I appreciate everybody's time. If anybody else has their hand up, Missy, would you let me know, please?
Cindy has her hand up, and Tom Fickner has his hand up.
Thank you.
And Dan.
Tom Fickner, please.
Yeah, so I would, overall, it seems like, and Cindy alluded to this, the routing slip process is geared to be informational for all parties. And I would not want to see, for example, in John's case, having their department jeopardized if in fact that something is not quite right, say within a Board of Health standing, if it has no bearing on whether or not what might be going on affects the building permit itself, I would kind of agree that it shouldn't hold up that process, as it doesn't sound like there's any legal basis to. However, it may just be a case where, from a Board of Health perspective, Missy's trying to show due diligence in trying to cover the bases for what the BOH has responsibilities for and oversight for on its part. So it may come down to a case where maybe within the BOH, we're going to have to take a look at maybe covering these pieces of information that we come across through this routing process in such a way that it may become a regulatory issue for us with regard to follow through when we do come across something that raises a flag, from our standpoint. That's kind of how I kind of see this whole conversation. I do appreciate everybody's input, but it's going to take some more review for sure. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Missy, who did you say else was, Cindy wanted to say something?
Cindy was going to say something, then Dan.
I just have very little to say because I agree with what Tom just said. I think that's pretty much hitting the nail on the head. I don't want to be in the position of getting a complaint from the building inspector where someone has sued the town for denying a building permit because they don't have a Title V certificate, even though there might be regulatory reasons why that has its own enforcement issues, that it's the wrong one. So I think what Tom said is unfortunate for the Board of Health, because it means you're going to probably have to put some more procedures in place for yourselves, is right on point.
Thank you. Dan?
I was just going to add, I looked, and so, I mean, to John's point, there have been permits that have been delayed, which, is something that needs to be figured out. Currently, there's 36 stop permits. 6 are held up by the building for some reason. 2 are active for historic, and some of those are just active, I think, waiting on paperwork, whatever. 1 by the clerk. There's a few held up at the inspection step, and there's 1 held up by the treasurer's office. It may have never been completed. But if that's helpful. And then I think I would just add, I think, and John may have said this, I think it would be really helpful to facilitate some meetings with departments, the building commissioner to come up with a game plan on this process and figure out what works best. I think there's a big need for that. I think we had a good discussion tonight.
I do too, and as I stated, thank you very much to everyone that's joined us tonight, and appreciate your time and everybody's input. Missy, is everybody satisfied? Is anybody raising their hand?
Currently, I don't see anyone raising their hand, but I don't know if your Vice Chairman Alan Greenberg has anything to say. We haven't heard from him tonight.
Yes, please.
Your turn.
I'll echo Andy's and Tom and Missy. Thank you very much to everybody for their input on this issue. It almost seems as though if there was some way to not stop the permit process, but to red flag it so that when the permit is issued, the person pulling the permit knows that X, Y, and Z aren't complete. Now, we might not be able to enforce it, but at least we would have a record that the permit holder was notified that they're not in compliance, because nobody is trying to prosecute anybody or to, deny anybody the opportunity to do what they want to do on their property. We're just trying to help people be compliant with the rules and regulations of the town of Mendon and the state of Massachusetts. So if there were a way to red flag the issues on a particular property that need to be brought into compliance, I think that would be a step forward. And it sounds as though the way the software is set up, we're not allowed to do that at this time, but maybe in the future, we could do that versus putting the brakes on a process that puts somebody else in jeopardy of not being able to do what they need to do in accordance to the law. So thank you very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll come up with a solution. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda. You're all welcome to leave, and we all appreciate everybody's time and input. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
The only thing we have left is the scholarships, right, Missy?
Yeah, but I looked at the agenda tonight. It didn't get updated, so I don't know with the open meeting law if you can actually discuss those. If you want to give another date, if you have a date where you just discuss those and those alone, you can do that. But that is a meeting that I will not attend, as I have a child who has applied for the scholarship. I don't want anyone to, I don't want to be part of that meeting, so to speak.
What is the date on the need to have an answer on these?
Graduation is Saturday, June 5th.
So it's like right now?
I mean, it's up to you guys. Again, I thought I had updated the agenda stating you're going to discuss the scholarships, but it's not on tonight's agenda.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure
Mike?
if that's a violation of open meeting or not. I don't know.
There's old business. I'm sorry, Andy. There's old business on the agenda.
That would be very old business. Like a year old business. I mean, I did mention that I put out the applications to the schools and everything, but again, it's up to you guys.
The reason why I ask is I have not read one of them. So if in fact Tom and Alan would like to go forward with this, you two can make the decision, because I have not had the opportunity to read them, and I don't foresee that I will before June 5th. So I will be leaving when Missy does also.
Tom has his hand up. Tom Fickner.
Take me, your turn.
I know, I was just gonna say, we do have the one item that we list on our agenda as a standard, which is the category of items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours prior to meeting, which could technically allow us to discuss this item. However, I would not be in a position this evening to discuss myself. I have not had an opportunity to review the scholarships yet.
And plus, I sent you 2 more tonight because I have not been in the office since last Wednesday, but I knew that they were dropped off at the appropriate time. So I mean,
decided.
I didn't decide anything, that you're not going to discuss it tonight. Do you want to schedule a meeting next week just to discuss it, or I don't know what you want to do?
I think that if everybody is available, Tom Ryder, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We did not have an opportunity to speak very much with you, and I know that you put something together for us for the well regulations. I saw an email. I didn't get a chance to read it. And I still have not gotten you the copies, Missy, that I have, the hard copies for the job cards that I would like to get to you and get you to scan them and send them out to everybody, so we can certainly get these 2 things in place ASAP. It's gone on too long, and if we had the job card in place, then the issue up on Butler Road would not have happened, because the installer would have had to have signed inspections. So it's something that I feel is very important that we get these 2 things out. So all that being said, next week on Wednesday, is everybody available for a meeting?
That's the only day I'm available.
Tom?
Yes, I'm available.
Alan?
Yes.
thank you. Tom Ryder, if you could make it next Wednesday and would like to join us, we're gonna schedule for another meeting right away, 1 week away, so that we can get some of these things ironed out.
Andy, if I can just say, when it comes to the well regulations and the signing card, I would like to have this all ready to go by July 1st. New fiscal year, it's halfway through the year to get things started. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think it's a good starting point.
I knew that.
Yes, you did.
Could I have a motion, please?
Can I just,
Motion to adjourn.
Tom Ryder has something to say real quick.
yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Tom.
apologize for cutting you guys off, but I just wanted to let you know, so what I sent over is, I took a look at our regs and, I started filling in the gaps, specifically on the, definition of the wells and the, and to start progressing towards what do you want to do regarding, 2 wells on 1 lot, for like a duplex system or something, and other, things that we're looking at as well. But I thought we should start with the semi-public water definition. And so we can start with, what is required or what is not allowed. But you'll see that I just, I put comments along that PDF on wording, and then we can add to it. So it's more of a progress print. It's not a rewrite yet. So if we have something, I'll keep adding to it, and then we can go over it next meeting, and then we can start formalizing a new draft.
Tom, are you referring to PWSs for the water supply?
Well, I see in another town they call it a semi-public water supply.
And what would that be?
Like more than one family, but it's not a private, not a single private well, but it's not a public water supply governed by the DEP, so it's got to be under 26 persons. So somewhere in between.
Okay.
So that was my thought on how, so that would cover the condo association.
And that's with one well drilled?
Yeah, 1 well drilled for 1 unit, or 1 well drilled for 5 units, or whatever it may be. That would be that'll start to become like a semi-public water. But that was just my thought on how to progress, so we have it defined.
Okay. And that's in your email?
So it's in the comments of the document I sent over. So.
Okay.
And again, it's more like a progress, so I'll keep adding to it. So there might be some clarifications that you might need to comment on. But I'm there.
Like me, I'm a work in progress.
Exactly. We all are, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Tom. Does anybody have anything else to add, Alan?
I actually like the term semi-private to cover a multi-family home with 1 well. I like that idea. That's it.
I'd have to see more about it. Tom Fickner?
Nothing at the moment with regard to what Tom's doing. I just got to take some time and just evaluate and draw up some questions at that time.
Okay.
I did have another question on the topic in general, the big topic of tonight with regard to routing slip.
That subject's closed, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, now that we've had the discussion that we've had, and given some of the information that we've been given, are we going to change a directive in any way as to how Missy's been operating?
I think that when she goes in, she should punch in and just sit there and file her nails and play on Facebook and just hang out, do some knitting, because we can't enforce anything, so just sign everything that comes through and just move it on.
So let me ask a question, Missy. And I'm not familiar with the software, unfortunately. I haven't seen it. So is it a case where you're checking up and it comes around and you're checking a box, or the box simply says, maybe you could tell me, what does the box say, or what is it that you're checking that then all of a sudden puts a halt to the permit, or to the process, I should say?
Dan's still here and he can explain more, but basically what I get is I get complete, reject, skip, comment. And I've hit reject because it is a red flag. It's what gets your attention. If I just comment, I've been commenting for 21 years. Well, actually less than that, because we never really were part of the routing process in the past. But if I comment, then there's no red flagging it. And actually, Alan and Andy won't be able to see that screen anyways, because they're on the phone. But those are the things that I would check: complete, reject, skip, or comment. And if I hit reject, then it stops. And sometimes, like I had I questioned, because no one else did, a building application that came out for Applewood, and the gentleman put down a certain address, and I questioned the address, and come to find out I don't have a well permit for it. So what happens? If John says they have to have potable water, if I don't have a well permit, can I reject it? I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Tom Ryder has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Like you're saying, regarding the well and the septic, and from what I heard from building inspectors in the past, other towns I worked in, they pretty much said the same thing that this inspector is saying, or I'm not sure if he's a director or inspector or both, that the two things that they can hold up is adequate water supply and a wastewater disposal. So saying that they don't have a water supply, that could be a holdup for them. So now they have to get, so it's an absolute rejection. No, now they have to apply to the Board of Health and then hand over to the building department their well permit. So we need to inform the building inspector that they do not have a water supply. And the second one is that if they have a failed septic system, if they don't have a septic system, then the same thing. They can't get the certificate of occupancy, or they're not supposed to get the certificate of occupancy without a certificate of compliance for a wastewater treatment, wastewater disposal, whether it's a connection or system.
Could that just be internal communications that could take place between BOH and building, and then maybe this is where the comment section could come into play to document the concerns that BOH has?
Yes, I think it's simple as that, because a lot of the times they continue the construction even though they don't have a certificate of compliance for the septic system, and then we issue the certificate of compliance, and then we all know that doesn't happen often, but they're supposed to wait until they have a compliance before they are able to move in.
But then I'm also told by the building inspector that he can't stop people from moving into their house. So if they don't get an occupancy permit, he can't stop them from moving in.
There's an extreme liability that the person who that moves in without occupancy, like if a fire starts or someone gets injured, or
So they
You know-
could go 20, 30, 40 years before any of that happens. And what happens if the house then changes hands? Because it's now gone 20 years and, we've sent 10 billion letters, certified or not, letting them know they're in violation of Title V, but they ignore it. And then they go ahead and sell the house. Well, there was never an occupancy on the house anyways. And then you go, well, it was 20 years ago. Who cares? Just because I've seen it happen.
Yeah, there could be a 7-year time frame where you need to take action on it. So my thought is that he can stop them from occupying. There are mechanisms for him to stop occupying, but is he choosing, to do so? And again, I'm not an attorney, but my discussions with other building inspectors are that, no, you can't move in until you have occupancy, and they will not.
It sounded like John indicated there's some sort of and I forget the term he used, some sort of a notice or something that is presented to the owner, a condition of knowledge or of requirements. Do you remember
Yeah.
the term?
I think that's what Mike Maroli brought up, was a certificate of something. I know they do it in Grafton. So instead of having this routing slip process, you are going to pull a building permit, whatever it may be. Well, before you even do that, you go to the Board of Health, Conservation, the water department, sewer department, treasure collector, whoever you'd have on this, and say, you have to get clearance from these departments. If you don't bother coming to us to apply for the permit.
Yeah, but we might need to send over the building inspector a letter saying they do not have a wastewater disposal. They do not have a water supply. Clear. They don't have proper sanitation to dispose of wastewater. They don't have or the ability to have drinking water. So I think that's what he needs, and then he can bring that memo over to the builder or whoever the owners is and say, you need to clear this up. So I think Dan has his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and I think this is all, it's a communication problem. And I don't know, from my perspective, I'm not really sure what the solution is. I think like what Tom Ryder was saying, unfortunately, those letters have been ignored. And this inspector, things change. This is, things are different. But, the in Viewpoint, it forced it to the forefront. It couldn't be ignored. They had to respond to it. And the building inspector, the building department has the authority to override these things. So I can, this doesn't help most of you other than the few that are on a computer. So that when you get this approval, you only have 3 options. You can complete it, reject it, or skip it. You can put in comments. The customer sees the comments. But what you can do, so let's say, this step gets rejected, and so now it sits here, it's red. The building inspector can go in, reassign it to himself, say, I'm overriding this, and pass it. And now the permit's not held up anymore. And there's a clear record of the building commissioner saying, I don't believe we have the authority to stop a permit here. And I'm not sure why that's not being done. I mean, I think there are limitations with this system, unfortunately, but, so I don't know.
So I think what it comes down to then is really knowing specifically what relates to the needs that the Board of Health has oversight for that are specifically in concert with the building department. So for example, there might be something that is going on a property that has nothing to do with the building permit itself, but there may be something that BOH raises a flag on. If that's the case, then I would you know, maybe it's an educational thing between us and building, maybe just having a little more considerable communication, more direct communication to kind of streamline that. That may be part of the solution. Back to you, Dan.
I think that was all I just figured I would share with you. And I would, I can sit down, or Missy could sit down and show you how it works. I mean, I don't know what the solution is here. I see, because we have the same issue with other departmental routing slips. I guess I'm not sure.
I just always thought that the routing slip was a great way of checking in with other departments to make sure that whatever the entity is, whether it's a building permit or the routing slip for a new business, or, whether it's the select board, us, that, the other town departments had an opportunity to chime in and say, whoa, wait a minute here. We have issues with it, and get the issues resolved, or get whoever in compliance. But if that's not what everybody wants, I mean, I'll take the Board of Health out of it completely. And we won't know what's going on, because a lot of what's happening with us being part of it, you have people who are renovating their homes saying, oh, it's an office, it's a library, it's everything but calling it a bedroom, even though in accordance to Title V, it's a bedroom. And then they go ahead and sell the houses. And then 20 years later, it gets caught up with Title V, because now a Title V inspector who's actually doing his job says, no, this system's actually, according to what you've given me, is actually designed for a 4-bedroom, but I'm counting 12 rooms here. So you actually need to upgrade the system. Well, when we get these routing slips in the building permit, that's what I was hoping that we would avoid, but I don't know anymore.
Well, I think the tool is a definitely good tool. I think it's good that we all the departments know about a property. I think that was the intent behind the routing slip. The question is how in depth does the town want to get in making sure that each department has leverage to implement the oversight for the areas of responsibility. And that's probably a broader conversation that we have to have. But I think, at least in the interim, using that comment section, when something comes along, and putting in the concerns, so it's on record and it's on file, at minimum, be doing that. And if there's absolutely something that comes across that is in direct correlation to what the building wants to do, I mean, like Title V or something specific, water, that's we can see there's a direct correlation there that could be a valid reason for doing an actual reject.
Tom Ryder has his hand up.
Yeah, so I know some other towns, they do stop the building permit, at least temporarily, to say, in most of the cases, you're adding another 2 rooms in the basement. Now you have 10 rooms total. Your system was designed for 4. You don't have an adequate septic system for that. But we understand you are sure you're really only you're gonna keep 4 bedrooms, correct? Oh yeah. All right. You need to do a deed restriction, and they have a format for it. It works pretty well as far as the process. So I mean, so I wouldn't call it reject. I would call it like they put it on hold in order to proceed with to clean it up, so that the next person doesn't get what they think is now 5 or 6 bedrooms, which indeed it's not. So I mean, I see the other point too is that how much time should we take to review some of the stuff? I mean, for the building department side, what is an adequate timeline to tell the owners that they need to do a deed restriction or upgrade their septic or whatever. Sorry, over to you.
Andy? I think we lost him for a minute. Well, I think for me tonight was more about, and maybe, you guys can correct me. I think it was just a starting point. The conversation had to start, and I think that's what we accomplished. I think we accomplished what we set out. Alan, what do you think?
I tried to come off mute, but I tried to.
Andy,
there?
I just said when we lost you there, what I said was I think that we set out what we wanted to accomplish tonight as far as the conversations had to be started.
Yep.
Now, maybe the next step is the Board of Health and the Building Department have a one-on-one conversation and leave everybody else out of it. And if there's other departments that want clarification on their part of the routing slip, that they have their own conversations. But I just wanted to have everyone have start talking about it so something would actually get done. And I don't know if I was right or wrong, but that was just my feeling on it.
No, I'm good with the way everything happened. At least now we know, and in my opinion, judging by what John Erickson said and Cindy reiterated, as far as legality, he's not going to put his licensure up to fight something that he can't. So now we know. All I think that should happen, as much as it sucks, when a permit comes to you and you know that there's no Title V, just put in the comments that there is no whatever the dates are and everything. We're still waiting for a Title V. This property is not in compliance. You've done your job. It goes on. They do what they got to do. 20 years down the road, when somebody goes to buy it and they find out that the property is not in compliance, you've done your job. That's about all you can do.
Andy, can I take a step forward to a little bit on this?
Yep.
If we indeed know that the system's in failure, or again, as you're saying, Missy, that there's no applied well on the property, or there's no well on the property, that we should let them know as well that there's no current septic system, like say for Hartford Avenue West, we know that that's a failed system. It's not in current use. Before occupancy is, they need a certificate of compliance, and we can put that information right out there. So,
but and that's all well and great, but you know what? I'm just kind of like a little defeated right now for the simple fact is, John said tonight that you can't issue a building permit, which a building permit hasn't been issued for a particular property that we have no well permit for. We haven't issued the well permit for because he's talking about potable water. But meanwhile, the house is still being built. It's still getting electrical inspections. It's still getting all the inspections it needs. So what is the point of it all?
And this was new construction? I'm sorry.
This is new construction. The one that you've got to go finish perk testing.
The one you were there yesterday, Tom.
And they're calling in for electrical inspections and everything else. So I can't say anymore because I'll say something I'll regret.
No, I just think it's a case where each department has to still do what we're charged in doing and, communicate the issues that we have. And again, it may come down to a case where BOH is going to have to maybe get more regulatory in its nature so that we can close up some of these loopholes.
Very well could be. I don't know.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, the routing slip doesn't give us any real leverage, which is what we were hoping that it would do. But if we put the building department on notice that something is not in compliance and they continue to do whatever they do, in my eyes, they're taking on the liability, and that would be a risk of his license. And again, we're not trying to stop anybody from doing something that they would like to do. We're just trying to make sure that everybody's in compliance. And we're trying to help them get there. But if they ignore us because they can do whatever they want, all we can do is put another department on notice in writing that something is wrong. And we've, pretty much done what we can do, unfortunately.
Or maybe
I
just-
understand. Go ahead, Missy.
Or you just bring Cindy in and this town starts paying more on legal fees because then you start taking people to court.
But we know, we see that's
For fines.
Everybody knows that we can't do that because we don't have the means to do that. And she brought it up. Well, now it's a civil suit. Well, great for the attorneys, but not great for the taxpayers.
Well, potentially we could do that if we changed our regulations, or if we enhanced our regulations, or just got a little more stricter with our regulations. If it, you know what I'm saying, it may come down to becoming, I guess, for lack of a better term, more of a hot ass, right? Hate to say it, but.
Yeah, but then we need the ability to enforce it. And here's the building commissioner saying that he can't keep someone from occupying a house.
No, understood. I mean, it's a matter of each department knowing its ability and its level of authority. I remember back in the day, Lenny once told me that the Board of Health, and I think Missy's even said this before, the Board of Health is a tremendous authority in the state of Massachusetts, the local BOH. So a lot of it has to do with how the local BOH decides to structure itself and what kind of regulatory process it wants to implement. We've always, I think, as a general mindset, we've never wanted to be overly regulatory, and we want to, quote unquote, help people. But sometimes if people are going to take advantage, then maybe it's a case where we're going to have to become regulatory or increase our regulations to the point where then happens and we want to help somebody, then we can decide to do something about it when the situation occurs. But that's I think we have the power to redesign our department if we choose to.
Mm-hmm.
But
I agree.
Well, you may be very right, Tom. Maybe we have to make sure that we have plenty of bite, and just in case someone decides to take advantage of the situation and makes it difficult for us to be helpful.
that's all I got.
That's it for me.
All it takes is a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion. Thank you all.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody.
Thank
See
you
you
and-
guys next
Thank
week.
you and good night.
Good
Okay.
night.